Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is a deep dive into, well, one of the most publicly scrutinized accidental death rulings in recent memory, the case of Tamla Horsford. We were going straight into the sources, looking at the official rulings, the conflicting forensic evidence, and also the intense public pressure that really kept this case alive for years.
Yeah, and the central tension here, it never really dissolved, did it? And that's what you, the listener, need to grasp right away. Was this death, as officially ruled by two separate investigations, a tragic accident, caused by acute intoxication and just a really unlucky fall?
Yeah.
Or, as the public outcry and later the legal claims suggested, did the trail of evidence point towards something far more sinister, maybe even homicide?
So let's set the scene. It's November 4th, 2018 in Cumming, Georgia. Tamla Horsford, a 40-year-old mother of five, she was at an overnight gathering. Sources describe it as a kind of football mom's slumber party.
And she was found dead the next morning. And right from the beginning, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office concluded this was an accidental death, resulting from a fall. But the circumstances around the discovery, and then you add in the procedural issues that popped up later, it just immediately chipped away at public acceptance of that ruling.
Absolutely. You have to explore the details to understand why that official narrative just didn't stick for so many people.
Right.
So, okay, let's trace her final hours. Horsford arrived late, maybe around 10 p.m. on November 3rd. The gathering involved drinking, watching football, playing Cards Against Humanity. Pretty standard stuff for a party like that.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to note 3 men were also there at the house that night. The narrative often focuses on the moms, but men were present too.
Right. Good point.
Now, the timeline of discovery, this is where the first major questions really start bubbling up. According to witness statements, Horsford reportedly got up around 2 a.m.
Okay.
to go smoke a cigarette outside on the back porch. She wasn't seen again until 7:30 a.m. the next morning, when she was found face down and motionless under the porch.
Okay, so that's a 5.5-hour gap between the last confirmed sighting and when she was actually found.
Exactly.
And here's another detail that, immediately raised eyebrows. The actual 911 call wasn't placed until 8:59 a.m.
Yeah, almost an hour and a half after she was found.
An hour and a half later. Who made that call?
That call was made by Jose Barrera, who was the homeowner's boyfriend.
Okay.
And that delay, it's crucial because the initial ruling really leaned on the physical explanation. Death was accidental, resulting from about a 14-foot fall from the balcony.
And the main reason given.
The primary contributing factor cited by the sheriff's office was acute ethanol intoxication. Basically, she was extremely drunk.
Okay, but when we look at those forensic reports, there's this detail about an internal injury that, for a lot of people, just doesn't seem to line up with a simple intoxicated stumble off a deck. Let's get into that forensic conundrum.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How the physical evidence became the basis for both sides of the argument. The accident ruling and the homicide speculation.
How so?
Well, both the initial autopsy and the later GBI autopsy found multiple blunt force injuries. We're talking head, neck, torso.
Consistent with a fall, presumably.
Consistent with a significant fall, yes. And there were cuts, too, on her face, wrist, hand, lower legs. Again, could fit with landing badly after a fall.
And what about the intoxication level you mentioned? That must have played a huge role in the initial finding.
Oh, absolutely. The toxicology confirmed a blood alcohol level of 0.238.
0.238.
Yeah, which is, to put that in perspective for you, that's nearly 3 times the legal driving limit.
Okay, so very impaired.
Extremely. And investigators argued that level of impairment makes a fatal fall, loss of balance, misjudging where you are, highly plausible. It kind of explains why the initial ruling focused on impaired judgment, not necessarily an assault.
But then you have that internal injury. A fall is one thing, a bad one, sure. But how does falling 14 feet, even onto hard ground, explain a lacerated heart?
Exactly. That's the sticking point for so many people. The GBI medical examiner noted this critical internal finding, a laceration to the right ventricle of her heart.
Which sounds severe.
It is. This specific injury is usually associated with really high impact trauma, like a sudden crushing force to the chest, car accidents maybe.
So it's harder to just wave away as, oh, she tripped and fell.
It's much harder to rationalize how a 14-foot fall causes that specific, very severe internal injury and still fit the sort of simple narrative of an intoxicated stumble. This detail, probably more than any other, is what kept fueling the critics.
What was the official explanation for it then?
The official stance from both investigations was that all injuries, internal and external, were the result of the fall onto the hard ground below the deck. But, many argue that a heart laceration like that requires more kinetic energy, more force than that specific fall height would likely generate.
Okay. And even before the full autopsy results were known, didn't the 911 call itself kind of hint at these competing narratives already being formed?
That's absolutely right. In that call, Barrera, the boyfriend who called 911, he described her position, face down, and then immediately highlighted a small cut on her wrist. He actually suggested to the dispatcher it might be self-inflicted.
Suggesting suicide, basically.
Right, implying that. But
then, in the background of that same call audio, you can clearly hear a woman's voice speculating. What was she saying?
she could be heard wondering if Horsford might have been pushed from the balcony.
Wow. So literally from the moment authorities are being notified, you have these two completely different ideas floating around. Self-inflicted harm versus foul play.
Exactly. That foul play narrative was kind of baked into the scene handling, or at least the conversation around it, right from the start.
And then things got, well, procedurally messy, didn't they?
Hmm.
Undermining trust.
Oh, definitely. This is where procedural integrity really took a hit, and public trust just shattered almost instantly for many observers. About 2 months after Tamla's death, this major scandal broke.
What happened?
Jose Barrera, remember, the homeowner's boyfriend, the one who called 911, he was actually a Forsyth County court officer at the time.
Yeah?
Yeah. And he got fired. Why? For repeatedly accessing the internal police incident report about Tamla Horsford's death without authorization on multiple occasions.
Okay, let's just pause on that. For the public looking in, this isn't just some minor technical breach, is it? You have a court official connected to the house where the death occurred, accessing confidential police documents about that death.
It immediately suggests, at least to the suspicious mind, a potential mechanism for interference or cover-up, regardless of whether he actually altered anything.
It just looks terrible. It poisoned the well of trust in that initial investigation, didn't it?
Completely. Barrera was in a position of authority, and his actions, even if they were genuinely just out of, say, personal curiosity or anxiety, they signaled to many that the investigation lacked true impartiality.
And that's when the online attention really took off.
That's the moment, yeah. The hashtag Tamla Horsford just exploded online. People started connecting this questionable death, the weird circumstances, Barrera's actions, connecting it all to suspicions of maybe influence or protection within the local system.
But despite all that swirling suspicion, the initial investigation did wrap up.
It did. In February 2019, it concluded. Major Joe Perkins of the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office stood by the ruling of accidental death.
What was his reasoning?
He argued that the injuries, even though they were severe, didn't align with signs of a struggle or, deliberate foul play. He kept stressing the context, the heavy drinking at the party, and noting that witness accounts suggested she was alone on the deck when most other partygoers had already gone to bed.
So, case closed. Officially, anyway.
Officially, yes. And the public conversation did cool off for about a year. But then the summer of 2020 happened.
And Tamla Horsford's case came roaring back into the national spotlight.
With immense force, yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the resurgence wasn't just about the case details anymore, was it? It connected directly to much broader social and political movements happening at the time.
Exactly. The case was revived during the nationwide protests against racism and police brutality, largely sparked by the murder of George Floyd.
How did her case fit into that?
Well, our sources highlight that when the case resurfaced, those procedural issues we talked about, like the white court officer accessing reports about the death of a black mother under questionable circumstances, they were immediately seen through a lens of potential institutional bias.
By the public and the media, you mean?
Yes. Regardless of what the final forensic findings said, advocates felt the initial investigation might have been cursory, maybe rushed, possibly influenced by the victim's race. Tamla Horsford's name started showing up on protest signs, alongside other Black Americans whose deaths were demanding closer scrutiny.
And the family didn't just rely on public pressure, they took formal legal action, too.
That's right. In June 2020, their attorney, Ralph E. Fernandez, sent a pretty detailed letter. And in it, he claimed his team's independent investigation strongly suggested homicide.
Strong words. What was his basis for that claim?
Fernandez laid out this, really devastating list of what he saw as procedural failures right from the beginning.
Like what?
He cited things like witness statements being in conflict with each other. He alleged that a potential subject handled the body as well as the evidence prior to law enforcement arriving.
Interfering with the scene.
Potentially, yes. He also claimed crucial evidence might have been disposed of, and maybe most fundamentally, that the scene itself just wasn't properly preserved by investigators in those initial hours.
Did he connect the injuries directly to a struggle?
He noted that Horsford's injuries were, in his view, consistent with a physical struggle. But, and this is a big but, even Fernandez admitted his ability to reach a truly definitive conclusion was hampered
By what?
by a massive procedural mistake, or at least a gap. He specifically mentioned the absence of photos from the initial autopsy.
No photos from the first autopsy. How does that happen?
It's unclear exactly how it happened, but the lack of that initial visual record, it's a huge problem. When you lose those immediate postmortem photos, you lose invaluable context for interpreting blunt force trauma later on, especially if you're trying to determine sequence or specific cause.
That just sounds negligent. And it must have fueled the public's feeling that something wasn't right.
Absolutely. It's a procedural void that deeply fed the conviction for many that the full truth was somehow being obscured, deliberately or not.
So you have the attorney suggesting homicide, these procedural gaps. The public pressure must have been immense by this point.
Overwhelming. There's a Change.org petition demanding a second look. It got over 700,000 signatures.
Right.
Yeah. And celebrities got involved too. Rappers T.I. and 50 Cent, among others, were sharing posts on social media demanding an independent investigation.
Did that pressure lead to anything concrete?
It did. It worked. In June 2020, Forsyth County Sheriff Ron Freeman formally requested that the case be reopened, but crucially, he asked an independent agency to handle it. The GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Okay, so handing it off to the state agency. Why was that step so important?
Well, the idea was that the GBI would provide a completely independent review. It was specifically meant to address and hopefully counter all those procedural suspicions and allegations of bias that had swirled around the sheriff's department's original work. A fresh set of eyes, basically.
So the GBI takes over. They reinvestigate everything. What did they find? After all that, after the public outcry, the lawyers' claims, what was the ultimate conclusion?
Well, the GBI took their time. Their reinvestigation lasted over a year. The findings were finally released on July 28, 2021. And despite everything, the massive public outcry, the attorney's homicide suggestion, the procedural questions, the GBI ultimately sided with the original ruling.
Really?
Yes. They classified Tamla Horsford's death as a tragic accident. They stated explicitly that they found no evidence of foul play, and consequently, they chose not to pursue any criminal charges.
So we've kind of come full circle then. Started with an accidental ruling, then this period of intense nationwide public outcry, really spurred by procedural chaos and these claims of homicide.
Right.
And it ends with a final independent confirmation of that initial accident ruling.
Pretty much, yeah. And this deep dive, I think, really illustrates the challenge you get in cases like this, where the official findings rely heavily on the forensic data. You know, the blunt force injuries can be explained by a fall. The high intoxication does make a fall plausible. But those findings are constantly undercut by these compelling circumstantial red flags. You've got the court officer improperly accessing reports. You have conflicting witness statements. You have the admitted failure, at least initially, to perfectly preserve the scene.
So the facts might technically support the ruling, but the whole context around it just invites doubt.
Perpetual doubt, exactly.
It creates this really challenging gap, doesn't it, between like legal certainty, or at least official certainty, and public confidence. When a legal conclusion is reached, even by two separate agencies like the sheriff and the GBI, but critical witness accounts and evidence procedures remain disputed, what level of proof is actually needed for the public to really accept a ruling?
That's a tough question.
And what role does that continuous public advocacy play? You know, demanding scrutiny of closed cases, even if, like here, that scrutiny ultimately just reaffirms the original conclusion. Is there value in that process itself?
Definitely something worth thinking about long after the official file is stamped closed.